Master Your Mindset Radio, episode 39.
Welcome to Master Your Mindset Radio, the show where we empower you to conquer limiting beliefs and transform your world with your gifting and purpose. Now for your host, Elizabeth Nader.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm so excited because we are nearing the episode 50 mark. Today is 39. So those of you that send me nice emails after listening to my podcast, send me an idea for episode 50. I think it should probably be some kind of interview. So I welcome your ideas and we're going to be there before we know it. And it's a fun milestone. Anyway, today's episode is all about what are you thinking? Now, this morning in my Facebook group, I did a very short mindset minute on what you focus on expands. And that's true. We know that whatever we focus on in our lives expands, whether we focus on negative things or we focus on positive things, that definitely expands. And I've done podcasts and messages before specifically about that. In fact, I did a podcast about, I think it was red Ferraris, and how once I saw my friend's red Ferrari and engaged in a long discussion and interaction with the car and all that, that's all I saw for the next few days was red Ferraris everywhere. And it's not that they didn't exist before, it's just that I paid attention and I noticed them, and therefore my focus was on that. And so that we know that this is a true concept in life. So I want to say to you today, what are you thinking? Because what we think about matters. What we think about becomes who we are. Everything starts with our thoughts. And this couldn't be more important than in this time right now, as we still sit here in various forms of lockdown, and as we are still dealing with this quarantine and the effects of the virus in our economy and people's jobs and people's businesses and just mindset and the way that they think and fear and all of this. What are you thinking right now is extremely important. And I've been noticing so much fear out there for such a long time, but I have to tell you, just in the last maybe 24 to 48 hours, I'm sensing a shift. I'm sensing a shift out there into a more positive space, into hope, into people who are, maybe it's because they're standing up for themselves and saying that despite all odds, I'm going to get my life back, whatever that looks like. But I definitely am sensing a shift away from the extreme fear that we have had out there into more of a hopeful state. And this is good news, because in mass, as a society, we need to be thinking in a different way in order to see ourselves heal, in order to see our economy heal, in order to see ourselves be healthy physically, emotionally, mentally, and all of those things. So what are you thinking? Has anyone ever said that to you? What are you thinking? They usually say, what were you thinking, right? It's usually kind of like someone says to you with their finger wagging at you, like, what were you thinking? But what are you thinking? It really affects everything. Everything you are is affected by your thoughts, by your thinking. I read somewhere that up to 90% of all diseases start as psychosomatic, meaning they start in your thought life. Now, this is not to take away from diseases that people have and the real experiences that they have physically. This is talking about the root of them, that 90% of them start as a mental condition, if you will, in your thought life, and their roots are actually in the mind. That is pretty sobering. That means what you think, you actually become. That means that a lot of the things that we experience, even physically in our life, originate in or are aggravated by our emotional life or our thought life, right? Because our thoughts produce emotions. So we really need to be sensitive to the fact that physically our health is tied into our thought life. And on some level you already knew that, but some of you need to spend more time meditating on that idea that if you are chronically not feeling well, if you are chronically ill, in many cases there may be a seed or an origination that has to do with your emotional life, your thought life, and to take that seriously, not as a form of condemnation, but as a form of a roadmap to healing, is to go back to what are the thoughts that you are thinking. So we have to be very, very aware that we are responsible for our thought life. I've talked before about thinking of your mind as a store, like a storefront, and you're the owner of that store. And would you allow just anyone to come in? Would you allow just anyone in that store to steal your merchandise, to tear it up, to spray paint your walls, to trash your store? No, you would have them escorted out immediately. But if you think of your mind, your thought life as a store, why do we allow all these negative thoughts to hang around? Why do we entertain them? Why do we allow them to damage us so intensely and yet not take ownership and ask them to leave? Not to employ tools that we have at our disposal to clean up our thought life. We need to take that responsibility immediately if we want to see changes in our life. So I want to give you just a few different tools, whatever works for you, some things to think about as it relates to cleaning up your thought life and upping your mental game so that you can begin to see more positive fruit in your life, as opposed to just letting anything and everything set up camp in your mind and then therefore paying the price in your body, in your spirit, in your soul, and in your world. So some things to ask yourself, first of all, when you think about what it is that goes through your mind on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis. I have read that anywhere between, I think, 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts go through our mind every day. I mean, we have so many of them. And the great majority of them left unchecked are negative. The great majority of them, if we don't take control, are negative. So it's time to start judging our thinking. It's time for us to pay attention to what we think, rather than to be just a silent victim of our thoughts or a quiet bystander of the things that go through our mind. So what are some things you can do just to judge a thought? Now, you're not going to do this with every thought because you couldn't operate. We can't operate by taking every single thought, let's say there are 80,000 of them every single day, and running them through a process to analyze them. We would be incapacitated. So we all understand that on some level that we can't do that. But we do need to develop a habit for this so that it happens more easily and automatically. And there are certain categories of thoughts that we absolutely need to take control over and put through this process so that we can decide whether or not we want them continuously in our lives and in our mind. So let me give you a few questions to ask yourself. They're somewhat open-ended, but these may help you in relationship to deciding whether or not that is a thought that you want to continue to entertain. So when judging your thoughts, the first question to ask yourself is, are these thoughts mine? Now that may seem sort of strangely obvious. Just because that thought is in your head doesn't mean it's yours. Did it come from someone else? Is there an outside influence? Is someone else trying to convince you of something? We all have enemies of our spirit. Is it coming from an enemy source? And that's not a person, that's a spirit. Is it resistance? Where did that thought come from? Are those thoughts actually yours? Are they being influenced by somebody or something else? That's an important question to answer. Another question is, how did these thoughts arise? So when you're thinking something intently, when you're having a repeatedly negative thought, sometimes you need to stop and try to determine how that thought came up. What is the genesis of that thought? Now, it's usually tied to a limiting belief if it's negative, or a negative situation that's happening. But we need to know the origin and the reason why that thought is arising in our mind. Sometimes it's not so obvious, but it's important that we answer that question, or at least seek to answer the question of how did that thought arise. The third thing you can ask yourself is, does this thought follow the trend of my thinking? So especially for new thoughts. Does this thought follow the trend of my thinking? So hopefully you've been working on your thinking, and hopefully your thinking is more positive. So when a thought arises that you want to judge and analyze and determine whether or not you want to keep it around, you should figure out whether or not it follows the trend of your thinking. So if you have been training yourself to think about, for example, your future in a more positive light, to think about possibilities, to think about all the potential that you have, this is a vein of thinking. This is a way of thinking. This is a way of training your mind. If a new thought comes up and it doesn't follow that trend, it doesn't follow that thought pattern, maybe it shouldn't hang around. So that is another way for you to judge your thoughts. The fourth one is, do I really want to think in this manner? Now, you have a choice. We don't always use our ability to choose. Ironically, we do have a choice, but we don't always exercise it. I'm not sure why that is. That's another podcast. But choice is the most powerful thing you have. You have control over one thing, and that is your mind and what you choose to think and how you choose to focus your thoughts. So why are we not employing the power of choice? So in this question, we say, do I really want to think in this manner? Now, you may say no, but you may allow the thought to stay anyway for any number of reasons. Sometimes we just hold on to negative thoughts. Sometimes we are unwilling to replace them. Sometimes we know them so well that we're almost embracing the familiarity of those thoughts, or we're afraid to replace them with something positive for fear that we may be wrong, for fear that we may be exposed, for fear that might make us vulnerable. But we do have a choice, and you must acknowledge that. We have a choice to say, do I really want to think in this manner? And if the answer is no, then right there we know we must abolish this thought and replace it with its opposite partner that is spoken in the positive. Replace it with something life-affirming. Replace it with something that matches the trend of the positive thoughts that we had. Replace it with something that's rooted in truth. So that's where we actually give ourselves that choice. And then the fifth question I would ask when I judge my thinking is to say, how was this thought stimulated? So it kind of relates to number 2, which is how did these thoughts arise? But usually there's a situation or a scenario that happens, something that occurs in our life that stimulates a thought. And that is usually related to an experience, something that we've done before, something we've experienced before, something tied to a belief that we've formed as a result of our life experience. Now that belief may be false, it may be true, but the thoughts are related to that. So we have to, again, look and see how this thought was stimulated, what brought it up. Because if it is a negative thought, if it is a thought that we don't want to hang around, then finding how it was stimulated will allow us then to go on a mission to find that limiting belief, to find that negative experience, to seek healing in an area that continues to produce negative thinking for us. It's like this. Think about your thought life as clues to what's going on deep in your spirit. Your thoughts are clues as to what beliefs you need to challenge, as to what areas of your life require healing and further exploration. Your thoughts are a clue to that, because here's a reality. It goes all the way down, cascading to results in our life. So let me go through that, how that works. And if you've been with me for a while, you've heard me do it. It starts with a belief, a deeply held belief, which turns into a thought. And then a thought creates an emotion in you of either faith or fear. And either one of those emotions then create feelings. And there are thousands of feelings. And the fear feelings are tied to the negative feelings, jealousy, greed, depression, anxiety. The faith emotions are tied to those positive feelings of love, gratitude, etc. So it's either one of those two. We move into feelings, and from the feelings we're having, we say words. And the words really give away our feelings, don't they? So we say certain words that are tied to those feelings, which are tied to emotions, which are tied to thoughts, which are tied to deeply held beliefs. And once those words are said, typically we make choices. We make choices that are rooted in those words and those feelings, and then we have results in our life. That is a cascading effect of deeply held beliefs. And you work that down or back up that ladder, if you will, and you can find where the thoughts affected the emotions, that affected the feelings, that affected the way that we speak, that affected our choices, that affected then in due course the results we see in our life. So thoughts play such an amazing role, an important role in all of this, that it's important that we stop and say, what are we thinking? What are we thinking? That is my challenge to you today, to develop that practice so it becomes part of what you do on a daily basis, to challenge yourself to say, what am I thinking? And if you're not seeing good results in your life, work your way back to your thought life, and you're going to find things that need to change. So I hope you guys have a great week. Send me your suggestions for episode 50 because it's going to be here before we know it. And God bless all of you. I hope that you are able to make good choices as relates to your thoughts so that you can see excellent results in your life. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to Master Your Mindset Radio. Before you go, if you want to be part of a free online community of like-minded individuals for support, resources, and inspiration as you conquer your limiting beliefs and pursue your purpose, go to elizabethnader.com/community. That's elizabethnader.com/community, or search for Master Your Mindset Academy private group on Facebook. Looking forward to seeing you online.